Well, we are very much knee deep in the deployment season. Royal Caribbean has released a lot of the new cruises coming for 2027 and 2028, and I want to talk about what stands out about this year's deployment as we look forward to the 2027-2028 year. And I think it's probably appropriate we start with the biggest news, of course, which is that Radiance of the Seas will sail from Tampa. Just kidding, man. Of course, we're talking about Icon of the Seas to Galveston, the worst kept secret in Royal Caribbean in a long time. Royal Caribbean's had some really poorly kept secrets over the years, and I think Icon, or an Icon class ship, I should say, sailing out of Galveston has to be probably one of the worst ones. What I mean by that is it's one of those things that Royal never officially confirmed or talked about, but they kept alluding to it. So this goes back to when Royal Caribbean was going to build its new cruise terminal in Galveston, which opened in 2022. And they specifically said the terminal is big enough to be able to accommodate Oasis and Icon class ships. Now, from that standpoint forward, that was when we knew at some point in the future there's going to be an Icon class ship there. You also remember that Galveston had evolved a lot over the years. I mean, when I started RoyalCaribbeanBlog.com, Galveston really had, to say they had the B-list ships would be generous. They definitely had like the C-list ships out there, right? It was like the ships that were already out and about for a while, had been there, done that. Basically, they were the ones that would easily be, 5, 10 years old easily. And they weren't bad ships. It wasn't like, I mean, they did have, Vision class ships and whatnot, but, it was a big deal when Mariner of the Seas was based there. Like, people in Galveston were genuinely excited. I mean, I love Mariner, so I'm not poo-pooing Mariner, but I'm saying that was the bar that was set. And then they brought in Freedom class ships. I remember when Liberty went there for a long time to replace Mariner. Okay, now we're getting bigger. And then, of course, we had the Oasis class, right? And Allure of the Seas was the first one to go in there. And since then, we've had Symphony and Harmony. And basically, once you have that, the question just became, when are they going to put a bigger ship there? The Icon class ships. And this is interesting for twofold. One is, okay, the port can accommodate it. But secondfold is the role of Galveston in the cruise industry. And I know we're getting really deep into cruise baseball here. Like, I mean, if you don't follow the industry that closely, I am sure you are just like, okay, maybe I could listen to like the 80s station instead of listening to this episode because it's getting really deep. But you have to understand this is a significant moment here to have an Icon class ship coming to Galveston. And Royal did a very poor job of keeping it a secret. I mean, they kind of do it tongue in cheek. I mean, Michael Bailey made a lot of comments over the years. And I actually thought they were going to announce it last year for the 2026-2027 season, but didn't happen. But we are going to get it in 27 and 28. And that also coincides, of course, with the eventual opening of Perfect Day Mexico, which will happen sometime in late 27. Icon will get there before that. But, this is very much a big deal because it's going to, I think what Royal Caribbean is hoping for, reinvigorate those cruises. I mean, you're going to have Perfect Day Mexico, you're going to have Icon class ships. And when you sail to Galveston, you're pretty much only doing Western Caribbean. There are some itineraries that do go to Perfect Day as well, which is a big deal. You get to get potentially Perfect Day Mexico and Perfect Day Coco Key. And that's a bit of an outlier, not something you usually see out of Galveston. But the Galveston cruise market is growing because so many more people are willing to cruise out of there. But at the same time, it's been a very tired itinerary. If you're sailing out of Galveston on a 7-night cruise, you're going to Cozumel, Costa Maya, and Roatan. And while that's not really changing at all, what is changing is twofold. One, an Icon class ship, and two, Perfect Day Mexico. And I think that's where they're looking at this as a growth opportunity. So by far, a really big deal. The other really big deal so far in the deployment, in my opinion, is also an Icon class ship, and that's Legend of the Seas. Legend of the Seas is going back to Europe. And the reason why I say this is a big deal, I could be wrong, but I don't believe Royal Caribbean has ever sent an Oasis, or an Icon class ship for that matter, to Europe unless it coincided with an amplification, meaning basically Royal wouldn't send these big ships over to Europe for the summer unless they needed to bring the ship in for dry dock, maintenance work. Every 5 years, cruise ships go in for dry dock, maintenance work, and they basically were like 2 for 1, right? Because there's a shipyard there, they're going to get the work done, and since it's already there, we'll get a season out of it. And that's been their MO for many years. Whenever you see like Allure of the Seas this summer, as an example, was in Europe. Why was Allure there? Because she went in for her amplification. And you can go back many years, going back for Symphony, Harmony, Oasis. I mean, it's been the thing. So I'm really surprised, or not really surprised, but it's surprising that Legend is going to go back without one. It's just going to go back for the summer. And it's basically following the Odyssey of the Seas game plan, if you will. So when Legend debuts next summer, she's going to start off in Europe. That's a big deal in and of itself. Spend the summer in Europe, come over to the U.S., and then offer 6 and 8 nights Southern Caribbean itineraries out of Fort Lauderdale. This is exactly what Odyssey did when she debuted. And then now, as we know, she's going to go back to Europe and offer cruises in the summer. They haven't released it yet. I was recording this podcast, and I think we're going to get that actually next week. But since I'm recording it here, my bold prediction, it's not really that bold, is that Legend's going to come back to Fort Lauderdale and offer the same thing basically again. And the fact they're sending an Icon class ship back to Europe maybe speaks to a couple different things. Maybe there wasn't a better option out there. As I say all this, I would have to look it up. Maybe there isn't another Oasis class or a natural fit, another ship that needs to go in for a dry dock, and that's part of the reason why they're not, sending another ship instead of Legend. But it's still a big deal. Royal Caribbean, you have to remember from a business standpoint, again, your biggest ships, the Icon class, the Oasis class as well. These are your biggest pieces. This is like your quarterback. This is your number 4 hitter in baseball. These are your big boys, and they're ladies, but you know what I mean. Like they're here to, make you money. They're here. They can go almost anywhere and do well. So you want to maximize them by putting them in the highest markets with the most demand, and that'll generate the highest revenue, right? And so putting them in bringing it over to Europe in a market, again, that's not really the pattern unless there's been a refurbishment, which makes the ROI a little more easier to take. They're doing it anyway. So that's kind of the biggest, I think the number 2 thing after now Icon to Galveston. That one is definitely the biggest surprise. Other than that, I'm not sure there's a terrible amount of other surprises here, and that doesn't surprise me, ironically enough. Royal Caribbean over the years has really gotten down to what works, what they're looking to offer. If you're looking for a cruise line that's going to wow you with new itineraries, exotic places, and new sailings, and sailings that go like well beyond 10 nights, you're not going to find it on a Royal Caribbean. You'll find it on Celebrity. You'll definitely find it on Silversea, and certainly other lines out there as well. But, Royal Caribbean really has honed in on this is what most of our people want. Most, remember, before you send me a nasty email here, Matt, I want to see a 11-night deep Caribbean cruise on Icon. I'm sure you do, but that's not what most people want, and they're trying to adhere to the mass market, if you will. And Royal Caribbean's a mass market cruise line, and so their itineraries are not that going to be different from year to year. Occasionally, you get one or two like, oh, that's interesting, right? I mean, the Alaska season is a really good example of this. For the Alaska cruise season, we're going to see basically 4 ships, and it's the same. They are different. You're going to have different ships sailing there, but it's the same makeup. 2 Quantum class, 2 Radiance class ships. Actually, I take that back. 1 Radiance class ship, 1 Voyager class ship. But you have 2 ships in Seattle, 2 ships in Vancouver. And you've got this. Some do round trips, some do open jaw. But this is like the playbook going back many years. I mean, probably over a decade. You're just swapping out, one for another. And you have Quantum sailing instead of Ovation this year, and Anthem instead of Quantum. You just kind of get like, it's a little more musical chairs than anything that's too crazy. But the Alaska cruise season is pretty much been 4 ships, 2 in Seattle, 2 in Vancouver, and some offering round trips, some offering open jaw sailings. That's been their MO for a long time. So no surprises there. It's just a question of which one's going to be there. And quite frankly, the ships that are in Alaska have more to do with where they're going to be, where they need to be, I suppose, in the winter than which ships they want to have in Alaska. What I mean by that is they're tied to the Australia cruise season in large part. Not always. Some ships do actually transition back over to the East Coast, but almost they're just the Radiance class ships. But anyway, if you're going to have, Anthem of the Seas offering Alaska cruises, well, Anthem's going to be over in Australia, basically, to counter that, right? Because they spend half their year in North America, in Alaska, and half the year over in Australia, or maybe even Asia for that matter. So that plays into part of why they decided. So again, probably, I hate to say the most uninspired deployment, but that's the one right there. Certainly, if you look, let's go back to the Caribbean here for the 7 night short, 7 night and short Caribbean cruises. Other than Legend, and it's not even Legend, we didn't even get to that one. I mean, you got Star of the Seas offering, 7 night cruise out of Port Canaveral. You've got Utopia and Wonder still doing the short sailings there. Harmony is going to come do mostly 7 nighters out of Port Canaveral. That's kind of a nice thing. There are a couple of like 2 and 5 nighters there, but mostly 7 night cruises. And I joked about it, but Radiance will be out of Tampa. Nothing too crazy here. This is like tried and true stuff. Not a whole lot of variation. Really, if you're looking at for variation, you're probably looking at the most so far, anyway, beyond Icon, was really what we got this week. You got Icon out of Galveston. We talked about that to death. You've got Symphony coming back. Actually, it's kind of interesting to me. Probably, if I had to pick a second surprise out of that deployment, you're going to have Symphony of the Seas also sailing out of Galveston. So you've got Icon and Symphony. So if you're somebody who is a fan of cruising out of Galveston, well, you're going to have probably the best lineup of big ships. If big ships are your thing, obviously, some people may not care about that. But a lot of people usually, when they live outside of Florida, the first thing they complain about is why don't we have, bigger ships in our market, when our market being whatever market they live in, Texas or California, New York, whatever. But anyway, you're going to have two really big ships out there to offer cruises from Galveston. And it's not nothing. I mean, I think that's a pretty significant change there. And on top of that, you also have Liberty of the Seas offering shorter cruises. So 3 solid ships out of Galveston is not too bad at all. If you move over to Bayonne, you've got Oasis sailing out of there. You'll have Odyssey coming back for the winter season. Maybe I think something as interesting as Odyssey is doing actually up to 12-night cruises, which is unusual. I just went on a whole diatribe earlier about how Royal really doesn't do those longer sailings. But if you are looking for a long sailing, Odyssey might be the one, although, of course, half that cruise will be spent getting up and down the East Coast, but I digress. On the West Coast, you're going to have Ovation and Navigator of the Seas. One Ovation doing the short cruises, Navigator doing the long cruises, long being 7. Solid lineup there. Lastly, we have Baltimore, and Baltimore is going to do exactly what Royal basically said they were going to do, which is to make it a seasonal port. If you remember last year, actually it was actually earlier this year in March, Royal Caribbean didn't announce anything. They just didn't add any cruises out of Baltimore, and then it looked like they were pulling out of there. But Michael Bailey, Royal Caribbean CEO, talked about it and basically said, we're not pulling out, we're just doing it seasonally. So Baltimore will only be a summer cruise season. There'll be no more winter cruises there. And when he was asked about this, by the way, all this came out during the President's Cruise this year. He talked about why, and basically he said the logistics is the issue there as to why they're not offering year-round cruises, specifically the winter stuff right there, right? And he called it's just logistics and reality. Winter products out of the northeastern ports just have more challenges, and that's all he said. And to me, what that really means is the weather. Winter storms, the duration required to get from Baltimore, even New York for that matter, you're spending a day or two, especially in the wintertime, in cold weather, sailing down the coast. And then it's another day or two coming back. So not only are you far away from the ports, like all you're going to be able to get to primarily on a 7-night cruise especially, is down to like Nassau and Port Canaveral, but half that cruise is, I don't want to say too cold, but for a lot of people, they complain it's too cold for them. Like, as opposed to a ship that sails out of Florida, like where Vision's going to be in Tampa for the winter in 26, you're starting off in a fairly warm place, and you're going to even a warmer place, and there's not as much disappointment from that standpoint. And I think that's where they're seeing it. And Royal, to their credit, rather, I should say, they do listen to customer feedback. Now, on the one hand, you're going to have people from Baltimore in the Mid-Atlantic region who are like, well, this is terrible, don't do this. But then you also have the same people put in their surveys, yeah, it's too cold. And, not that they don't want to sail out of there, but that's the logistics and reality I think he's alluding to. But you'll have Vision of the Seas returning for the summer of 27, offering cruises out of Baltimore. And that's just, I think, going to be the marching orders from here on out, where you're going to have summer cruises only, and winter time, the whatever ship is there, which is probably almost certainly going to be either Vision or Grandeur, is going to go somewhere else, right? And by somewhere else, I really mean Florida. So, so far, again, the icon stuff is a big deal. Legend, interesting, certainly. The Vision stuff in Baltimore, nice. And everything else is kind of more like, I don't think there was anything else that really truly shocked me, which of course I am now definitely committing to ourselves to the next week. We're going to have a big surprise coming out of the seasonal release that'll be coming out there. I'm sure, because I've just jinxed myself. But, this is the fun part. I mean, part of, once you really get into cruising and you start following this stuff, I feel like the deployment season is the closest thing cruise fans have to like the NFL draft. Because if you're an NFL fan or an NBA fan for that matter, and you follow, who's going to be who's going to get drafted in what order and in what team and where they're going to go, it's kind of like that. I mean, in a much nerdier kind of way. But anyway, I think there's some interesting changes there. Nothing tremendously out of the park, other than, of course, I think Icon and Galveston. That is definitely a big deal. But going forward, I mean, I would expect there would only be an Icon class ship there, and they would never pull that out of there, especially considering how much that market is growing. But anyway, it's a big deal from that front. And otherwise, you have a little bit of like, oh, that's nice kind of changes coming in 2026 and 2027. All right, friends, time to answer listener emails. This is the part of the episode where I answer emails you've sent me. First email today is from Joe. Hi, Matt. It seems the two most popular topics in different blogs, and it doesn't matter which ones, are the drink packages and what is better, an indoor cabin or a balcony. I find it interesting comparing the types of cabins, but the blogs on why I will only take interior cabins or the 10 reasons not to take a balcony cabin are not appropriate topics in my opinion, for the simple reason there are no good answers, good or bad cabins, depend on each individual and circumstances. My question is, what's your take on this? So you're absolutely right. This is like blog fodder 101. 10 reasons you should book a balcony cabin, 10 reasons you should book an inside cabin, why a balcony is a mistake. So you're right that there is not an absolute answer to these things. You're 100% right, actually. The thing is, and this is, listen, I just told you it's blog fodder, so from my business perspective, it's good for me to share this kind of stuff. But I'll be honest with you, the reality is, while it is very much a personal decision and there's no universal answer, there may be a compelling argument in one of these blog posts or videos that we talk about that for you, the viewer, you specifically, Joe, or somebody else watching it, they say, you know what? I never really thought of it that way, but you're right. That particular reason is the reason why I'll always book a balcony cabin or always get a drink pack or something like that. I find that if you have 10 reasons to book a balcony, you don't usually find all 10 as being the reasons why you will. You find personally, and you're based on your own preferences and whatnot, one or two that truly stand out. Like, those are the reasons why. As an example, for a balcony cabin, we'll use your example here, why you should book a balcony. Number one reason people talk about a balcony, they don't care about price. I mean, they don't care, but it's not about price. It's not about anything else. It's about fresh air. And that's it, right? And for a lot of people, I think the most interesting counter argument to that is something I talk about a lot, which is how much time are you really going to spend out there? It took me a long time to realize I don't spend a lot of time on my balcony. It's got to be, number one, not hot. So 90% of the time, especially in the Caribbean, I never go out there because it's too hot. I mean, I did a video recently, earlier this year when I was in Star of the Seas, talking about how I changed my mind about the infinite balcony because I hated the infinite balcony at first. I thought it was stupid. I mean, I thought it was stupid. I tried it. Then I really thought it was stupid. Gimmick really is what I should say. Not stupid, but you know what I mean? Just like, it's a window. It's not a balcony. And I was right, except for somebody brought up the fact that, yeah, you're right, Matt, it isn't. But at the same time, do you spend that much time on your balcony? No, I don't. Now imagine you have that balcony space back in air conditioning, and you can use it for whatever you want to spend it for and still have a view. It's not a balcony, but you get more living space, more usable space. And that changed my mind. So a lot of these things are about changing your mind, or at least giving you one or two different ways to look at it. Not necessarily everybody should book a balcony. Everybody should book an inside room. And we try to talk about that here on Royal Caribbean blog. We'll do, why you should only eat specialty or why you should only eat included restaurants. It's not that we necessarily believe one another. If there's a topic that I believe in, like, you should do this, I will lay it out for you. There are topics along those lines I have done those things for, but otherwise a lot of it's more just food for thought. And that's kind of where that is, Joe. You shouldn't read as much into it as like these are the things that like they're. I don't think in a lot of cases they're being brought down as like the 10 Commandments and like stone tablets. More just like, you know what? Here's some interesting, compelling reasons we've heard over the years, and you deal with it how you want to go with it. And for some people, it might open their eyes, something they hadn't thought about, and for others, it either reinforces their own beliefs or maybe questions them. Next email is from Brad. Hey Matt, we recently spent time on Quantum this season. Thought the entertainment was less than desirable. We jokingly called it Royal Carnival. We spent many nights with Royal Caribbean, and this is by far our least favorite entertainment experience. My question to you, how do I maximize my responses on the survey? In the past, I've not had enough character space to give a full response. My purpose is not to complain, but to give honest feedback. We convinced some friends to cruise with us, and this experience did not live up to their previous experiences. Any feedback would be greatly appreciated. Okay, that's an interesting question. And you're right. The feedback form, the survey, and I talk about this all the time, survey form is like the number one way to give feedback, and it's the most important piece or tool, I guess, as cruisers we have to actually give feedback. Like if you tweet Royal Caribbean, if you post on their Facebook page, I would argue you're pretty much just blowing in the wind. It's not going to go anywhere. I don't think anyone really cares. Not even cares. It just doesn't. It doesn't reach. It doesn't. They don't hold that in very high regard because it's too easy. Anybody can do it. They don't know if you've actually been on a cruise. Blah blah blah. But the post-cruise survey is definitely really really important. My advice is to be pithy. I know you've got a great example and a great explanation as to why whatever your point is your point, but because the characters are limited, the most important thing is you just convey your overall thoughts. So, as an example for the entertainment, you could simply say, we sailed a lot with Royal Caribbean, but we really feel the entertainment on this ship is poor, bad, whatever you want to call it, and it doesn't live up to the standards set by other ships. You don't have to explain yourself. You're not in a jury room or a courtroom, rather, to explain to a jury why you're right and they're wrong. Like it's just. It's the think of it more like the idea, the concept. It's almost like a tally vote. Look at it that way. That's a really good way to put it, actually. If one person says, I don't like the entertainment on Quantum, okay, well, that's one vote. Okay, that doesn't really mean a lot, right? But if they see a lot of people complaining, not that it doesn't matter about the substance of it necessarily, but, if they're seeing a lot of complaints, then something kind of like, oh, okay, maybe there's an issue here. And that's where that comes in. So, you don't have to you can get your point across by simply just, saying you don't like it. And honestly, if there's really something they want to get back with you, they'll reach out to you. But you shouldn't look at it as necessarily needed to provide a war and peace type experience as to why that's the case. So that's how I would look at it. Just, doesn't look at the standards and then move on to your next point or your next complaint. And that way you can maximize your space. Next email is from David and Joy. Hi, Matt. We watch your weekly YouTube chat every week, but after my wife gets home from work, so we can't join in the actual live, just the replay, which, by the way, I'm going to stop you right there, David and Joy. That's not a problem. I love that, too. Thank you for watching that. That means a lot. Anyway, back to their question. We have 2 Royal Caribbean cruises in 26, April on Allure of the Sea, September on Symphony of the Seas. Both are junior suite guarantee cabins. We've already been assigned a cabin on both cruises. Thought it was interesting. Most say you don't get assigned the cabin until just before the sailing. We have Celebrity Mediterranean in August 25. Have a great time in Europe. We'll be watching for your updates. So what's interesting here about the guarantees is, quite frankly, it depends when you book it, right? And it goes both ways. Yes, sometimes it goes right to the sale, close to the sale date. Sometimes guarantees are given pretty early on. And I suspect you booked your cruise pretty early on, and I think that's probably why you got it assigned that way. Next email is from Stacy. Just found your podcast and have been binge listening. Thanks for all the information. My husband and I are seasoned European travelers that have never been on a cruise. We did some basic homework and booked a 5-night on Freedom out of Miami in February for the first week of December. It may be too late, but any mistakes to avoid or things to definitely pre-book. We got a very good rate for a junior suite and also booked the drink package after doing the math when it was offered at 45% off. We did the limited dining as well. Feeling a little unsure of that one. Is it worth or to worry about watching the price on our cruise if we feel it was reasonable, or should we just go and have fun and just learning the experience? We don't know what we don't know. Also, will we feel out of place not being a level tiered cruiser when it comes to dining or other amenities? Great questions. So I want to go backwards here. We feel out of place not being a tiered cruiser? No, not at all. I don't think it really matters. This is definitely you don't know. I mean, you're not going to have access to the Crown Lounge or some other benefits, but it won't matter. You'll have a great time. I don't think that'll be a factor at all for you. In terms of the pricing, I actually say, if I get something at a price that I'm very comfortable with, be it a cruise fare, be it a drink package, I usually it's not that I stop looking at it, but I certainly don't pay that much close attention to it, right? If it's something like where I'm booking a cruise because I really want to go on this particular sailing and it's like, oh, that's a little much, then yeah, I pay a lot closer to it, attention to it. So I don't think it's necessarily, you don't have to hound it. Some people really do watch their drink packages, prices, and cruise fares like every day. I think it's crazy to do it that much. I check it periodically. For cruise fares, I'll be honest with all of you, I rarely check them, but of course, full disclosure, our sponsor, MEI Travel, they do it for me. That's one of the services they offer to their clients. They don't do it every day, but they do periodically reprice them, and many times I just get a message from my travel agent like, hey, we saved you, $20, $100 on, this particular sailing, and great. So, yeah, I feel like the pre-cruise stuff is more fun anyway, and you can kind of look at it like a sport. When there's a new sale, I'll check those things out. In terms of, anything to avoid or pre-book, you basically hit the most important stuff. Pre-booking, your excursions, any add-ons for the cruise, that's a huge thing. And it's funny, I'm actually recording this episode on board Freedom of the Seas on a 5-night cruise. But otherwise, there's not a whole lot else to pre-book. It's not like the bigger ships that have shows you can book and a little more of that. There is no ability to pre-book shows. You simply show up for them. I think you just want to, especially as a new cruiser, experience as much as you can. You've got to figure out what you like in your style of cruising. So go see different shows, go to different parties, go to different bars. And if you go for 5 minutes and you love it, stay there longer. And if you hate it, leave immediately. Just find your way and experience as much as you possibly can while you're on there. It's 5 nights. It goes very quickly. But I will tell you that the most important thing right there is to sample as much as you can. I think that's really, really important. And our last email today is from Trisha. Hi, Matt. I'm a pretty new cruiser. I took my first cruise at the tender age of 49 this past May and fell in love. I'll finish out 2025 with 4 cruises and 2 booked already for 26. Not bad. One of those will be my first roller coaster cruise on Radiance of the Seas on June 1st. I'm taking my daughter for her 20th birthday and her first cruise, and we'll be traveling with a friend and her daughter, same age. I'm not too concerned about what us old folks will do, but I'd love some input on Radiance of the Seas has to offer for 20-year-olds. We're cruising to Cozumel and Costa Maya. I know they want to visit the ruins, but not sure which port is better for that, nor what to do in the port to make the trip more fun. All right. So, once again, I don't know why I always go backwards, but I find it easier to go backwards. For the ports, if you want to do ruins, do it in Costa Maya. Do not do it in Cozumel. Cozumel, you need to take a ferry over to the mainland. That ferry is nicknamed the Vomit Comet because it's so rough, people get sick. Do it in Costa Maya. It's wonderful there. It's a lot easier to get to, so that's easy. 20-year-olds, unfortunately, are in a weird age. They're too old for the teen club. They're too young to drink, right? And they probably don't have a lot or any money to gamble. So they kind of are in a middle ground of like, what are we supposed to do? Number one, it's good that your daughter has a friend coming the same age, so that's a plus, someone to commiserate with. I don't want to, play stereotypes that, 20-year-old women just enjoy going to the pool deck and sunning themselves. But I think for, you're going to the ports, definitely invest in excursions there. That should be your focus for what this cruise is all about. And then for the other days when you're on board the ship, dining certainly can be a big thing. There are 3 really great restaurants on Radiance of the Seas, Chops Grill, Izumi, and Giovanni's. So I think a dining package might be a good way to kind of, spruce things up a little bit. And of course, the main dining room is not bad either, so don't overlook that. And then, really, I think for what a lot of people do is, just enjoy the pool deck for what it is. Whether they're the type that do want to sun themselves, maybe they like reading, maybe they just like chatting, maybe they'll be in the pool, maybe they like to do trivia events. I mean, there are a lot of activities, and not every 20-year-old is the stereotypical 20-year-old, so they got to find their own way in this. But I think if you plan out the ports and you lean into the dining, that could be an easy way for them to, I think, certainly enjoy the cruise, but also enhance it. So thank you, Tricia, for the email. Thank you to everybody for checking out this episode of the Royal Caribbean Blog podcast. Of course, you can always email me your questions, Matt@RoyalCaribbeanBlog.com. Until next time, I'm Matt. We'll talk again real soon.